Okay, so we're here with Weston Martinez. He is running for the Texas Railroad Commission. And what we're going to do, we already discussed the plans. I'm John Wertz with Bob Bagley. And we're going to turn it over to Wes and let him do his opening for 5 minutes.
All right, well, thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm Weston Martinez. I'm running for Railroad Commissioner for the state of Texas, and I've been involved in the conservative fights across the state, whether it was fighting Wendy Davis or fighting defunding Planned Parenthood or Julian Castro in San Antonio or the HERO ordinance in Houston. I've stayed engaged and I've stayed involved, and there's other issues that I've been involved with from time to time. My wife Geneva and I and our 5 kids are from San Antonio, Texas, and it's really what drives me to be in this race. I mean, I know you guys are taking time to be here. Obviously, I just drove into San Antonio from San Antonio to meet with you guys, but working so that our children have the future that they deserve by fighting back the EPA, fighting back Obama, and stopping them from coming in and providing undue regulations into the oil and gas industry, which really has kept the Texas miracle alive, is something that is really encouraging to me, and I'm excited about doing every single day. As far as conservative values, so those are self-explanatory. The other thing is that I've actually been a real estate commissioner for the last 4+ years with the state of Texas, and I understand the role of the commission and the role of a commissioner. So I understand the process by which we have to work under and the confines that are in there. And like anything, you've got to be able to navigate the minutia in order to move the ball forward. And knowing how to work within the confines of that and the confines of the legislature is something that not having to learn those ropes is important. But while process and my conservative values certainly are key issues, this is a technical situation. And I actually have some oil and gas background. I started an oil services company in the Eagle Ford Shale a few years ago, and been blessed by that. It's been a great time. Dealt with operators, landowners, mineral rights, everything that goes along with that, and saw some of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and realized that there's really an opportunity to bring those groups together so that we can present a unified front to really keep Texas moving forward, to keep, again, what I talked about a minute ago, keep the Texas miracle alive, and by making sure that, again, the EPA and different folks don't come in here and try to over-regulate different parts of our industry like they do today. So we're very excited about it, and people are, again, excited about me being in this. I actually looked at running for this a few years back, then did not do that, wound up supporting Brian Sinton, and prior to that wound up supporting Barry Smitherman. And it was good times on the campaign, and just really trying to help keep the Texas, just keep the oil and gas industry fair and predictable. I mean, as a statewide commissioner today, I take calls obviously from people that have issues all across the state, and I'm one of those guys. They've got my number listed on the commission site. People call me, I answer the phone, and I try to figure out what can I do to help push the ball in order to solve the problem, or in some cases tell them no, your request is not valid, but at the same time promote those values of property rights, all those things that we really hold dear and near to our hearts here in the state of Texas. So really excited about having the opportunity to step into, hopefully with the support of the voters, into a larger agency that has the same mechanics, but again, a different set of customers, but again, those same principles of, making sure that we're fighting for, lower taxes, lower regulation, increased transparency. All those things are some things that really kind of come together, and excited about doing that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And question number 2, which is, what's the biggest federal overreach issue for the Railroad Commission? You mentioned on there that the export of our products on the world market, was #1, and that's been resolved since that ban was lifted. And then you said a close second was the burdensome, unconstitutional rules by the EPA. related to CO2 and methane emissions. What can you do about this as a commissioner?
Well, several things. I mean, one, on the ban being lifted, the House voted on it. The Senate still has to vote on it, and then we all understand that probably Obama's going to veto it. The concern I have on that, and the reason why I listed that as number one, it's a huge opportunity for us, obviously, to become energy independent and to increase not only the security of Texas, but the security of the United States as a whole. But my main concern is, how do we make sure we don't get all kinds of pork added to it along the way? So pragmatically, just why I felt that was the number one thing. But as far as the EPA and what's happening with overall emissions, they've got so many different regulations that people have. They just want to take an interpretation that's in the Beltway kind of interpretation, and they don't really want to take the perspective of what has the state of Texas, what have the citizens, what have the people over here, what are they doing already, and whether we're talking about flaring or whether we're talking about different things as it relates to permitting, they've just been really onerous in what I think is their misguided interpretation of how we do things.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned in the very end of your closing, your opening statement, about lowering taxes and better transparency. Can you elaborate on that? What can you do to make the tax burden better for, is this for the oil industry, for business, or for the individual Texan?
Well, so I think in one of the statements I made a comment in there that I'm not looking to try to find some way to provide corporate welfare to anybody. But when I talk about how do we reduce taxes, one of the things that I'm looking at is the revenues that are coming out of counties. For example, there's a collection that goes back to Austin and then it's fleeced and then sent back to the counties. And one of the things that I've looked at in the past is, if you had a way to provide local control for some of those dollars or a portion of those dollars to stay locally and make sure that they were actually used on specific infrastructure projects, bridges, roads, things like that, and not amphitheaters, God bless amphitheaters, but let's make sure those dollars are really getting back into where they actually need to go. If you do that, then I feel there's a categoric shifting of the overall budget. So now you see more transparency, because now, pardon the pun, the rubber's where the road is. And now when we're talking about, like we mentioned earlier, getting stuck in 45 or taking the Hardy toll lane, we've actually got extra roads that are being built, and we've intelligently used what's happened in the oil and gas field as our build out, instead of then coming to the voters and saying, we need to tap the rainy day fund to do X, Y, or Z. So I think there's a relational approach to how those things come together. Transparency, I do think that when you're looking at transparency, there are some things that we can do in a, how can I be polite about it, in a more technologically advanced way at the Railroad Commission. Some of the reporting that's done, some of the way the reports are actually produced, again, because they're out in the middle of nowhere, okay, so fair credit to them. So maybe the only signal they do have is a pencil and a pen and a piece of paper. But, looking at how do we backhaul that information through some of the old channels that have gone away by the FCC.
Go ahead and finish.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, don't
Go ahead and finish. This is just a guide.
Got it.
We'll try to keep this
Sure,
close to-
I really try to follow the rules. So I think that there's, God has really blessed me to see solutions where other people see problems. So I see there's opportunities to go in there and fix some things. I'll give you just a quick example. Okay, our water in the state of Texas. All right, the big flash flood we had back in March, April-ish, I think that it was. The amount of water that came through that flash flood was equivalent to all of the water used for fracking all the wells in Texas in 3 days.
Wow.
Now, all that water, where did it go? Straight to the Gulf of Mexico. Those producers are paying money for transport and for water, as I well know. They're paying for those things, and they're doing things like bed and banks permits, which is a technical way of putting water, using the river system as a conduit, And so they put their water in, right, property rights, their water in, take their water out. There's a formula that says how much they can actually take out. But imagine if we took what they're doing in that and used some of that capital they're already spending to build some different reservoirs along the rivers that we already have in existence, so that the next time we have a flash flood, now we've filled it up
Right.
instead of just passing it through. And again, it's just an example, but we have to take, having a fresh set of eyes look at things, and having someone that hadn't been stuck in the Austin bubble. I really treat the Capitol like Sodom and Gomorrah. So, no, sorry, I wasn't trying to be funny there, but treating it truly, you're there because you have to be, not because you want to be, I think and having a fresh set of eyes allows us to see some opportunities where we can look at some things.
Okay. You might get some pushback from the EPA or the environmentalists.
They need to ask our permission before they cross the Red River, is all I know. Sorry, how you doing?
Oh, come on.
Weston Martinez, good to see you. Is this the NASA guy? This is the NASA guy?
No, transportation guy.
Transportation guy, man, we were just talking about how we could fund roadways through private zones, anyway.
So, on question 4, what side are you in the class between landowner and explorationist? You mentioned there's an opportunity for us to unite against the EPA. Who is us?
The actual operators and the landowners. I mean, look, I mentioned that my oil and gas experience has been, relatively new in my professional career, but there's not a kid in South Texas that didn't ever, that didn't go out and help their dad gauge some wells every once in a while when they were a kid, because that was the only way you could afford to pay for hay, back through the 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s. So, being out there and doing that, seeing and actually having, I've really been blessed where I've got a rural background and I've actually got a city background, so they kind of joke that I'm the one guy that can go work cattle in the morning or go to hog at lunch and then be in a tuxedo in the evening. So having that perspective, there really is an opportunity for the landowners and the operators to work together, but the way that happens is they've got to be more informed about what's going on, what their request actually generates on this side and what their request actually generates on that side. I think that everything, in the oil field, man, when it is, I thought I understood what big oil meant. I thought I understood the oil rush. I thought I understood those things. But until you see it, it really is something that it's almost uncomprehendable. And so you have this rush to get it done, and it doesn't matter if your leg's on fire. You don't have time to get the water to put your leg out to put the fire out on your leg. So the landowners and the operators are both rushing for different objectives, one to get paid, one to make money, but yet they have the common goal. How do we get into the resource prudently, conservatively, and how do we do it cost efficiently, and how do we make it last? And I think that's where we can look at bringing those people together. I can't tell you how many landowners I've run into that are mad because a landman said one thing, and the landowner comprehended something different, and the operator that contracted the landman to execute X, Y, or Z is also out of touch. So that's where I think there are aligned objectives, and aligning their objectives in a constructive way is, again, how we band together, and then we don't have questions about, well, why are they doing this and why is that happening? And that diminishes requests outside of Texas to different entities.
Okay, I want to come back to that.
Sure.
Do you have time limit or you want me to shoot?
One of the issues that we have in the states right now, and this goes back to EPA and OSHA and federal government and our potentate, is the pipeline going through. We have property rights issues, but we also have business issues and national defense, if you want to put it that way. How do you feel about the pipeline going through and where we should where we should be with
Sure.
that, with
So-
working again with the rights.
Absolutely. So number one, I'm very glad that you brought up national defense as it relates to our oil energy, because I truly think two things. One, I think that Texas is a target because we've got a lot going on. Two, if you look at all of the pipelines that have been permitted while Obama has been our president, and then you look at the one that they said no to, I mean, there's thousands of miles of pipeline that they had, that has just flown right through. So the question, that I would ask the president, who, by the way, I have, I've been told he said my name in the Oval Office. It was not a good thing. He was mad when I started the recall on Julian Castro because they wanted him to be the new VP Golden Boy. But in that situation, why, what is really the problem? I mean, if the landowners are coming together, if the landowners want it, if the state of Texas wants it, and if it's going to benefit people from top to bottom and create jobs and generate revenue, again, are we a government that has people or a people that has a government? I mean, at the end of the day, they work for us, we don't work for them, and I think, to me, that's the biggest issue. Where the pipeline goes, look, I don't support the concept of eminent domain. I think it's a man, that is that's one of those things you better not, that's like picking up the red phone and calling in the call numbers for the suitcase. You better not do that unless it is a absolute something that should never happen or ain't never gonna happen again kind of a situation. So balancing that, how do we get it done? And at the same time, how do we protect the property rights? It's very delicate, but extremely important. And it all falls into a national security perspective, again, because of the things I mentioned earlier. And we're becoming even more. I mean, look at the refineries. I mean, look at what happened whenever we had one hurricane hit just south of y'all for a little bit. I mean, a buddy of mine that's got a gas company was the only guy that could get fuel into Houston. And it was just, he told me some of the stories, and it was just insane.
All right, there are some issues with technology there at the Railroad Commission. Can you explain those and describe what you might do to try to fix those?
So there's several things. I don't think we have a long enough time to answer that. I will tell you that I'm a technological guy. I like to increase technology. I think that when we're talking about, whether we're talking about flaring permits or whether we're talking about just readings, well readings and things like that, how do we do that in a more efficient and pragmatic way? One of the things I think is that when we're looking at debunking the whole, fracking is causing this at the surface, one of the things that we look at is, actually video logging down and below and taking seismic readings before, during, and after, so that we can say, okay, here was the seismic before, during, and after, here's what was impacted, here's what was not. And turning the private sector loose to work with that and seeing where the industry wants to go, because the delicate balance that you have is, do you come in and mandate, right? Because if we're property rights guys and we're small business folks, do we come in and tell the oil company, you will comply with this? Or do we create a conducive environment that says, hey man, if you do this, here's where the benefit comes for us and you, and really create, a triple W, win-win-win. And I think that's looking for those key areas is where we try to advance. And again, whether it's some of the things that I mentioned or 1,000 things that we haven't even thought about, even finding out as far as increasing technology. Earlier, one of the things that I mentioned was, in the oil field, in Eagle Ford Shale, just as an example, I always nickname it Saudi South, because it's like a sandbox. If you don't bring it, you don't have it. So in some cases, I said the only connectivity you have is your pen and your paper. But we can look at intelligent things like some of the old FCC channels that were being used, like two-way ham radio stuff and microwave technology, all right, which we know works even when there's a snowstorm kind of thing. And so maybe the solution for the future is in the past a little bit and provide some more reliability in monitoring, whether we're talking about monitoring wells or whether we're talking about, again, flaring permits. Everything has to be on the table. No stone can be unturned. I'm the kind of guy, when somebody says it's the way we've always done it, man, I have a problem with that. So,
Okay. I've been in the industry for about 35, 40 years, downhole side. My wife works for a company and she has to do reporting to the state, specifically Railroad Commission. Significant issues there.
yeah, it's an ugly system.
It's supposed to be being updated.
Had that been happening for a couple of years?
Well, at least since last year,
Yeah.
and if our memory serves us, it's the same company that was developing the Affordable Care Act software. So,
Oh, dear
if
God.
you can confirm that,
I will find out. I don't know.
okay, and see, if you know what the status of that is, that's a lot of heartache. I know that I have to put up with every night.
That's why it's always important who the first lady is, because the power of the pillow.
That's right.
And my wife's a corporate CPA. She went to A&M. Went to A&M Kingsville on a bull riding scholarship, but
You did or she did?
I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, if she was bull riding scholarship, she went on a bull riding scholarship, she was.
No, she has all her,
Cookie.
Turn that here.
she has all her marbles and all her teeth.
Okay.
I just have all my teeth.
Okay, so what are we asked, what are the three main reasons you're running for office? And your third part is achieve energy independence. Is that possible?
It's like going to the moon. We have to do it. It's impossible if we don't try, and if we don't cast the vision that, if the guy at the bottom of the ship doesn't know where the guy at the top of the ship is going, then we've got a problem. And yes, I do believe it's possible. Is it going to be easy? No. I think it's one of those things that it's going to be hard. I think it's going to be bloody. I think there's going to be people from all kinds of places that are going to just, find all kind of blind salamanders everywhere that try to find excuses as to why we can't, why we shouldn't. Look at when Gerald Ford even did it. My goodness. It's just shocking, in response to our position on Israel. It's like, are you kidding me? I got a big problem with that. I got a big problem with people telling us what we can't do. Unfortunately, it's a motivator for me, but I know that it's the right thing to do, and I know that it's appropriate, and we've waited too long. So, to me, failure is not an option. Where do we actually break the water to get the baby out? I can't tell you where that is, but I do know that, man, every single day, every single way, everything has to just push towards that so that we can find ourselves on the other side of the goal line someday. I met a gentleman who was an economist for Ronald Reagan, and first-hand conversation I had with this guy. He was responsible for basically bankrupting Germany in the process, which was what they used as a means of putting the pressure everywhere to make them tumble the wall. And so,
Germany or Russia?
I meant Russia, yes. And so in the process of that, I just thought, if you can't beat them, just bleed them to death. And it was a very interesting conversation, which I will always appreciate. So when you're doing what's right, you find a way.
Well, this will go back to national security again, and EPA and OSHA and
Is it a bull riding question?
state, or no. But it could be. States' rights and Texas independence. But, we haven't built any refineries since '73. And part of that's been because of all the crap from the federal government. Technology has changed. I think we can do better than what we have, than what we've done in the past, and be better environmentally than what we have in the past. What do you see or can you do as a commissioner to help that process along, to help the companies, motivate them, and it's a win-win for the entire nation, or Texas if we succeed.
And motivate them to get us to the point where
to where they have new refineries, and it goes back to the oil independence,
Got it.
energy independence.
Got it. So several things. One of the things that I think people don't realize, and this is the reason I mentioned water a minute ago, they don't realize the symbiotic relationship between energy development, water, and electricity. And when you look at, for example, to frack a well, you said you and your wife have been in the industry combined longer.
Be 35.
Yeah, okay, so, I just turned 40. That wasn't a joke towards you, it was towards me. I know you're gonna edit the tape, so I wanna make sure that,
There's no.
oh, good, that's even
Straight
better,
up.
good.
What you see is what you-
That's good, so I am here, yes, this is not. But, there's a symbiotic relationship between, energy production, oil, and electricity. And when people realize how much electricity is spent to lift water in Texas, they will start flipping out about things like scarcity pricing, right? And whenever we talk about ERCOT, and they don't even realize that the oil and gas industry really is a big chunk of what's pushed us towards scarcity pricing, which everybody here in Houston knows about, you know, how that impacted one of your local companies that was playing the market. And so when you look at that, I believe that you truly have the ability to pull the scales off of people's eyes so that they can realize that, okay, we have to get more refineries built. Nuclear power is so much proven to be so much safer than all the excuses they've given us for years, but yet it takes you longer to permit a refinery or a nuke plant than it takes to even build it. And so you're gonna go bankrupt, generally speaking, just waiting for the cure time on the permit to be approved. And I don't know why we as Texans have to wait on them to do something that benefits us that is a crucial need. I mean, with the amount of people we have moving into Texas on a daily basis, with the amount of industry we have going on, again, why, I can't, you know, I'm not king of Texas, nor do I want to be, but in the process, I just have to ask the simplest question: why? Why not? Why are we waiting, and why aren't we doing everything we can to run full speed at this problem that's been looming? I mean, if you took the oil and gas sector and you worked on getting them onto microgrids, you could reduce the scarcity pricing situation that's caused by every time they got to run a rig, it's 450 kV they got to run out there, so they got to have 3 to 4 100 kilowatt generators out there, all of them that are pumping, you know, hundreds of gallons of diesel a day, times 3, times 4. Now we're looking at, well, wait a minute, we got flaring in natural gas that happens.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we capture that natural gas, turn it into power right there on site, generate our own electricity? Oh, but wait, we've got some people from DC that are telling us we can't do this on our own property. I have some significant problems with it. So when I hate to say that it's all really connected, but I really believe that if the general public knew how really intertwined those things were, I think that it would open their eyes to the unified front that I talked about earlier that we have to present to the folks north of the Red River, and let them know that, you know what, however we solve the problem in Texas is probably going to be the way you're going to solve it every other place in the world. And most people, as you guys know, the Eagle Ford Shale goes into Mexico all the way to Monterey. Well, do you think they're going to have an easier time developing their shale play or a harder time? They're more remote than South Texas. So what do we do to make it better here so that whenever they do their process over there, we're not left with, right, all of the dust and the stuff that blows over from Mexico to the United States from the El Nino effect? What do we do here that helps us down the road there and then increases our trade along with along the border? So those three things, I think, if I'm a football coach, I got all three on the line, and I need all three of them pushing at the same time, and whoever breaks through, everybody follows behind them, and we just keep pushing, because there's no excuse why we should even do what we did. The Valero refinery was done as an accident. They designed the Valero refinery because they were working on refining sweet crude, and they thought, well, that'll never happen. Well, now, obviously, with New Star, one of the reasons why New Star has just been, skyrocketed is because they retooled the existing refinery to be able to handle the different type of crude, and now Eagle Ford Shell bumbled up and, anyway.
Yeah, that's how they're overcoming that, is just expanding
Mhm.
current refineries, not
Mhm.
necessarily building new ones, so.
But it's still very costly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And why, and for all these, you know, I've got a 4-wheel drive Z71 Suburban. Okay, my carbon footprint is smaller than the person driving the Prius, because I can haul 8 people around at one time. And it's a hybrid, which is the hilarious thing. You can you can put the flex fuel in it. But the weird thing to me is, why do all these liberals stop you from putting a state-of-the-art refinery in place? Don't they know there's gonna be more efficiency and then jobs created at the build-out? Anyway, I'm sorry, I could talk about that till your next person's turn.
All right, so a couple of years ago, we were in boom times, $120 a barrel. Now we're looking at $35 a barrel. What should the commission be doing differently in these more lean times?
You know, really, they need to be finding out how, again, like I talked about earlier, how do you prevent that, how do you get that unified front between the landowner and the developer? Because how do we be more efficient in the way we do business, that out in the field, with the guy on the pump jack, how does it make his job more efficient, so that way we're actually decreasing the capital requirements for what's happening. We talked about technology earlier. I think a big way that you bring some of that in is by some of the technology. God knows your wife would like to have a little less time on the recording, but I think that is one of the key ways that we get smarter. And, you know, a lot of the operators, not all of them, but a lot of the operators, man, if everybody knew how hard big oil worked to do it right the first time, I think they would be truly shocked. And I don't think that big oil has done a good job of singing that song and telling that story. And I think that's a big problem. And so I hate to say that sometimes it's just simply communications, but you know what? That's the first thing you got to establish to win a war, is your communications. And I think they've just been so busy. Again, they don't even care about the fire on their legs. So I think that, you know, that's the way we do it. We keep the regulations fair and predictable. You know, there's UFTs that are going on right now for, you know, new fracking guidelines that they've been operating under temporarily. They're working. They actually came recommended from the industry and from the folks out there, and they've been working really well. The commission's looking at adopting those. They'll be long well into the adoption phase before I even get there, but those are some of the things that'll help. But again, I've got to feel like there's more. We got to keep looking in the same kind of vein.
All right.
This may be a little bit before your time, speaking of Florida. There was a gentleman that started and ran the Western Company of North America many years ago, and he used to have ads on TV that said, if you don't have an oil well, get one. And it was Eddie Childs.
Okay.
Mobil, before they were acquired by Exxon, used to run, I guess, issue pieces